Okay, so hello everybody. Good afternoon, good day to all of you. Thank you for joining. Today we are joining Raphael, who's going to talk to us about F&B product development a bit more in detail. I won't do too much of an introduction because she'll be the main one on today's topic, but thank you all for joining. Maybe one question before we get started, Raphael. When it comes to the questions of the audience, they will write them in the Q&A. Would you like me to notify you when a question pops up, or do you have special times dedicated for questions, or in the end?
I think that's a very good question because the presentation is quite long. I really want to try to be as interactive as possible. So I do have a couple of stops where people can add their question, but I would certainly like if you were just prompting me if anything comes up between now and then, because as I said, some of those slides are quite heavy, and I really want people to be able to take some of that in and then ask a question that they may have along the way. So thanks, Augustin. Just wave at me or let me know.
Perfect. I will do that. And yeah, with that, Raphael, I leave the floor to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, everything's for you now.
Thanks, Augustin. So good morning, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for joining this session on product development and innovation. I did have a look at the attendee list, and I was really trying to prepare some content that would be relevant to the different stages of your development process, to the different categories that you might be working in, and also to address maybe some of the very kind of operational hands-on questions that you may have, but also look at innovation in a more kind of broader and strategic way, okay? So we do have about 40 slides to go through together. Some of them are quite rich, and apologies for that. It's just difficult to give you the right level of information. So we will take the time to go through those together. At any stage, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. And if there is anything that I am missing along the way, we can certainly have a follow-up one-to-one discussion to answer some of those specifics, right? So don't hesitate to chime in. I'd like it to be as interactive as possible and make sure that you have all of your questions answered. And just maybe for the overall objective for today, so some of it is very educational. Some of it is very much on the kind of challenging side, so that you get a chance to look at your project from a different angle. And I'd like to be inspiring as well, just to kind of give you some insight, some foresight, some perspective on my own journey, so that you can also think about that and maybe integrate it in your own journey around product development and innovation. So again, I don't have any visibility on who's attending today because I won't have the time to kind of look at that. Augustin and Isabella are going to support me along the way. So please feel free to come in at any stage. So I'm going to share my screen. I think that's the best way we can do it for now. So bear with me. I think this is the screen that I want to show you. Can you see that in presentation mode?
Yeah, I see it perfectly well, full screen, and everything looks great.
Okay, so bear with me. I just need to see if this is going to work. So again, you know, the topic that we are going to look at today is product development and innovation. A lot of my experience is in the food and beverage industry. And then from that, I did spend quite a lot of time in the medical device sector and also biotech, biopharma. So overall, I did gain some perspective on the life science as a whole. And I worked as a project manager. I worked as an SME because of my background in food science and technology. And I did work very closely with other disciplines, like, let's say, regulatory, quality, operations, finance, marketing, sales. So, you know, I couldn't pretend to be able to answer all of your questions, but at the same time, I should be able to address them maybe immediately during the webinar or maybe as a follow-up as a follow-up opportunity. So don't hesitate to ask your questions. And I think when we look at product design and product development, you know, often as entrepreneur, we might be very focused in a specific area, but we really need to understand that, you know, our focus here is to look at our projects from the consumer perspective and look at it in terms of experience. And I think one of the big shifts that I have seen over the last maybe 10 years is we are no longer talking about product development anymore. I think we are really talking about a solution. What kind of a solution do we want to provide to our customer, whether it is B2B or B2C or B2B2C or D2C or whatever? We just need to kind of look at it from a slightly different angle. And I think that's what I'm trying to say here is, you know, there are so many different categories out there, and everything has become very, very blurred in many different ways. So we need to differentiate ourselves and not necessarily kind of getting completely locked into the product or the service that we want to develop and commercialize, but just look at it as an overall kind of solution that we want to own, to lead, to shape, okay? So that's kind of probably my main kind of key outcome that I would like you to take with you when we leave with this webinar. But between now and then, I am hoping that we can break it down into chunks so that it makes it easier for you to understand and for me to explain, right? So what are we going to cover during this session? We're just going to look at product development and how does it fit into the bigger picture, especially around innovation. We're also going to look at it from a consumer perspective, and the area that I would be particularly interested in is what they call consumer-centric innovation. The other thing is how innovation goes well over and beyond product development. So that's what we refer to as innovation by design. In every discipline, in every aspect of the business model or the operating model that you want to work with, you can innovate, right? So again, the kind of distinction between product development and innovation, how those kind of overlap and differentiate, I think is very important to understand. I also want to bring a little bit of perspective on the project management side of product development and innovation, and how we can not only innovate to develop and commercialize a specific product or a specific service, but what happens afterwards? What kind of a strategy do we have around lifecycle management or continuous improvement opportunities for the product that we are currently focusing on? And with that, I'd like to give you some insight as well around the process to plan and to implement product development and innovation. So this, I think, is going to give you a broad overview of my experience in product development and innovation. And just to let you know, the area that I have been particularly interested in is the nexus between food, health, and nutrition, right? So this is really where I have been spending most of my time in. People refer to this as customized nutrition or personalized nutrition. So I will try to give you some very kind of tangible, specific examples of what I have been working on, and hopefully also give you some perspective of how that fits into more health tech or life science projects in which you might be more interested in. So trying to bring you this very kind of operational aspect of product development, not forgetting the tactical and the strategy perspective, so that you can have a broad overview, but at the same time, more granular examples of what I have done in that space. Is that okay with you? So please let me know again if there is any specific question that you would like to address during the webinar and that I haven't already alluded to, I think it's important that we cover your questions. So come back to us on that if you can. So this slide here, again, really trying to give you some perspective on what I have done. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you can really see the physical aspect of the product. And in my case, let's say I might be looking very much on the nutrition, on the sensory science side of a product, what the impact on health might be, and how I can best design the product, right? And that's fine. But I need to be very cognizant of the bigger picture around the technology and how food science, food engineering, culinary science, food marketing can also enhance or maybe decrease, sometimes impair the product that I'm currently working on. So very important to kind of appreciate how technology, especially with social media, especially with, as I mentioned earlier, some very clear overlap among different sectors, can impact positively or negatively the product that someone like me would be focusing on. And again, zooming out here in the yellow box here is the social and cultural context in which those products and those technology are being worked on, right? And in that, I think social science is extremely important and should not be overlooked. So I do quite a lot of work with people who are more expert in anthropology or ethnography, and how some of those socio-economic elements might either support the product that I'm working on, or maybe are discrediting the product that I'm working on. And I think when we speak about social and cultural aspects of product development, we are talking about, you know, those macro trends, those micro trends, those drivers, those meso trends. All of that is at play in the background, might not be as tangible, but is clearly kind of going to shape some of the decision that our consumers are going to make when it comes down to preferences or decision for a specific product or a service. And again, just looking at it a little bit more broadly again, is how the environmental aspect of the environment in which we operated in can also play a very important part in the success or failure of product development and innovation. So something not to be underestimated. Obviously, you know, people talk a lot about sustainability, and that's kind of a word that has to be really kind of broken down and understood, and how we are going to integrate some of those concepts into our solution. Those are very important aspects of what we can consider to innovate successfully and to increase the probability of success when we look at product development, right? So I just don't want to take for granted that everybody understand, you know, what's happening here, and it can be kind of quite easily overlooked or understated, but I think it's just very important to look at it from a bigger picture perspective. And again, this is going to present you with opportunity to differentiate, to innovate, and hopefully, you know, align in a very kind of cohesive value proposition and narrative to capture those value, how do you call it? You call it maybe, how did you call it? Lives? Yeah, value chain of the product or the service that you want to develop and commercialize. Okay. So again, I think this slide is quite interesting because it's going to give you a little bit of a perspective in terms of how some of those innovation can be at play, and how timing is very important in product development and innovation. So like on the left-hand side here, we can see we have technology. The pace at which, technology is moving is obviously very aggressive, and we can evaluate technology as to whether, this is an incremental change that's going to impact our product or our service, or this is a very kind of disruptive change that's going to transform a specific category or a specific sector. So very important to map out what those might look like. And then on the right-hand side, we have the meaning, which is looking at it more from a consumer perspective, and how, there might be some subtle changes as to incremental, but we can also offer some very disruptive changes. So in that space, you can see different type of innovation around the technology, around the service, around the design, and also how that this look like from a market perspective. And the reason why I wanted to show you that slide is because timing is important when we look at product development and innovation. We might have a technology that is mature, that is ready to be used, but we may have a consumer that not necessarily on the same page. So how do we strategize product development and innovation to reap value and to have a commercially sustainable offering there in the marketplace, right? So we need to balance those out very carefully, and we can also bring that into our strategy, how we are going to map out some of those commercial opportunities from a budget perspective, from a consumer perspective, from a resource perspective. So very important to kind of understand, appreciate, isolate some of those different dynamics here that can be happening between technology and meaning from a consumer perspective. Again, some slide here just to give you some perspective on how time is extremely important for product development and innovation, and how different disciplines will need to play together. There is obviously a strong overlap here, let's say, between marketing, product design, process, and production, and how at different stages of the development and innovation process, you might need to adjust your resources and your focus, right? So I think those kind of elements that might not be very obvious around technology, around time, around consumer, and the context of product development also need to be understood and strategized, and understand the alignment that needs to take place ultimately as an entrepreneur, how you're kind of putting those things together, okay? Right. So this is the kind of high-level overview of what's happening in product development and innovation as I understand it. If we go a little bit more into the products right now, and here I'm talking as a food scientist, a food technologist, I was trying to also identify what are the key parameters and criteria that I would need to really keep in mind when I want to develop and commercialize a new food and beverage product. So this is my wheel, let's say, because that's the area that I am very familiar with, but all of you should have your wheels, right? You should all have identified the key element for your product, and probably go into subcategories for each of those, just to ensure that you have something that is differentiated, ideally better than your competitors, right? So very important to be able to understand the high-level environment, but just as important, we need to drill into a very detailed description of what we're offering here, okay? And anything in between should also be taken into account, all right? So again, just a very kind of specific example of my space, right? How do I operate in the food and beverage space in terms of key purchasing criteria, key performance indicator for my product, right? So we will certainly look at texture, we will look at the brand, we will look at the flavor, appearance, nutrition, and taste. So some of those You know, I would have used mainly in the plant-based category, and ensuring that I had an end product that would meet my consumers' expectations, my consumers' requirement for all of those different characteristics. All right. Another way to look at my product, and in this case, did some work on the coffee category. But if I look at consumer-centric innovation, I will have to map out how my product compared to maybe other prototypes or competitor products, and how my product is going to be perceived from a consumer perspective. So here, let's say, for example, in the coffee category, we did do some work onto how our offering needed to differentiate itself, and the axis that we took were on the so on the y-axis, we have the individual and the social aspect of coffee consumption, and then on the x-aspect, we had the functional versus the emotional aspect of the coffee consumption. So again, you know, beyond the product here, what we needed to look at was the overall experience. And that's why at the beginning of the webinar, I spoke about solution. We just can't focus on the product. We need to look at the overall consumer experience and the context in which those products are being used and consumed, right? So those are other type of criteria and parameter that people like me would be expected to focus on and to focus on, but also to report on, right? And to design the testing or the type of development activities that need to be planned and then implemented and characterized in order to be successful. Okay, I'm just going to stop for a second because I think, you know, there was quite a lot there, and I'm just wondering, Augustin, if I did get some feedback from the audience in case I missed anything on the kind of high-level overview, but also very kind of granular aspect of product development and innovation.
I'm trying to see. I don't see anything yet. No, I don't see anything in the questions. Startups, again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Drop them in the Q&A or in the chat, or if you'd like to ask a question verbally, raise your hand and I'll bring you up to speak with Raphael. But so far, so good.
Okay, very good. I hope I didn't lose anybody. And again, really trying to give you some perspective on the different aspects of innovation and trying to make it as generic, but at the same time specific, so that you can understand how those can be implemented for your own project or your own product, right? So let's continue, right? I have another kind of example. Yes, please.
Danny had their hand up. Danny, I will allow you to talk and you can, ask a question.
Hi, thank you. So I don't know if you're going to get to it at some point, but we at Terra Bioindustries do functional high impact ingredients out of low cost feedstocks using our biotech. And we basically do upcycling. And upcycling is it's hard from a consumer perspective how to place these products in the market. And I did want to understand a little. It looks like you will be going there, but since you opened it up and you wanted to be interrupted, I figure I bring it up earlier on.
Thank you, Danny. I will not go into the specific of upcycling ingredients during this session. However, I would be very happy to have a follow-up discussion with you. For now, what I would like to mention is that similarly on the ingredient side, there should be an awful lot of focus on maybe, let's say, this slide, for example, and how your ingredients are going to respond to some of those important attributes that are specific to the food and beverage industry. So in terms of ingredients, let's say we would need to look at the sustainability, we would need to look at the nutrition, we would need to look at the functionality, and how that express itself in the different application. And I think, you know, upcycled ingredients will play an important part in the taste, in the texture, in the branding, in the flavor, the appearance, and the nutrition. So definitely, Danny, you need to understand the ingredient in which you're working on, the competitive landscape in which you're operating in, the differentiating points, how you're going to characterize those ingredients, and just as importantly, how those are going to behave in the application, and what are the low-hanging fruit there for you to start kind of getting in there and have an ingredient or a solution or a product that is going to start generating some cash flow and take it from there, right? So you would have to look at the kind of short, medium, long term of product development and innovation, and you would need to look at the very kind of big picture, because upcycling ingredient sustainability, that certainly fits into the big picture. But at the same time, from a consumer perspective, Danny, how are your ingredients going to address those specific attributes or parameters that I have mentioned?
Thank you.
So yeah, so for upcycled ingredients, I think this wheel would be very important for you. This one would need to be adjusted. Let's say, you know, it won't be so much individual or social aspect of the ingredient might not be as relevant because it's more B2B. However, the x-axis here on the functionality and the emotional piece of using upcycled ingredients in product development and food application, that might be a very important kind of parameters to take into account, Danny. So we would need to look very specifically at your type of ingredients, but just to give you a high-level answer to your question, I think we're already touching on that, and hopefully we will continue to give you some pointers for the next hour or so, and then if you want, we can go through that in more detail after the session.
Thank you. Yeah, and there was a previous slide where it said at the beginning it looked product design as the biggest component, and I wonder if that is more tailored for B2C, or is that also important for B2B, like for ingredients?
Yeah, so you're right. That's probably a lot more tailored to B2C.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, you know, I think you should have a similar type of visual for your own product. So let's say, you know, I could look at that with you for B2B. It would probably look very different. It might even be another kind of function or discipline that we need to bring into the equation. But to be honest, you know, Danny, like marketing would have to be a very important element as well of B2B. Product design, it would have to be the process as well for those upcycled ingredients, and then production. How are you going to develop and commercialize? So there might be something missing. We can look at it together, but those 4 pillars should also be included into the mix. You know, in terms of discipline, that would have to be working closely together throughout the development and the commercialization for B2B. Is there anything that you think should be added or shouldn't be here for B2B?
It's a good question. I do think that for us, the process development was very, because we're at the beginning, so the process development is very important. And there's also, because upcycling is such a new, our upcycling approach is different. We do enzymatic fractionation. So the production aspect of it is also how to scale it up I feel has a lot of relevance to demonstrate that these ingredients are possible to be produced. But it did make me think. It did make me think because yeah, product design. End of the day, we do think like we have a protein concentrate, a barley protein concentrate, and a barley sugar from brewer spent grain. And our barley sugar, for example, is a syrup. But product design made me consider like, oh, what if, you know, it is an extra step to make that granulated sugar. So I just wanted to understand, and yeah, it made me think. It's a slide that made me think. So thank you for clarifying. And I definitely would love to connect at another time as well.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. And you know, one thing that I think I missed in the overall presentation is IP, Danny, right? So you really need to bring IP into that journey of innovation. And what I'm hearing from you is that, you know, there is a specific kind of technology here that you're developing and that you are trying to commercialize, and this is likely to impact some of the attributes of the ingredient. So like just from our brief conversation, I would think process development here should probably play a very big part, and into that really bring the IP element as to a very important value generating component of your business, right? So I'm only kind of thinking out of my head, but that kind of slide should definitely trigger some thought, and then it's up to you to kind of adjust some of those elements to suit your project, right? But you know, if it's an emerging technology that's going to give a unique profile to those ingredients, whatever that profile is, maybe the process development here should be much bigger than it is on the left-hand side, and or maybe it's a very strong component all the way. I don't know, Danny, but we can certainly look at that again after the session. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
All right. So again, I just would like to give you a little bit of an insight on my experience around personalized nutrition and health tech, right? So I did mention how there is an overlap across multiple different sectors at the moment, and how we could potentially map out some collaboration opportunities or some expansion of the area in which you're currently working on. So here is a slide where on the x-axis here at the bottom, you can see, you know, product format, delivery, service, and technology. And those elements combined together would very much kind of capture the solution that I spoke about earlier, right? So we are no longer talking about a product now. We are talking about a solution that we want to provide to our consumer. And then on the y-axis, I just wanted to give you a kind of a flavor of how different segments or different audiences would engage with different type of products around health and wellness. So going from the bottom to the top here, we have, I'm just going to use the laser pointer here. So we have our Gen Z and our millennials who are usually interested in the quick fix. You know, they want a solution just for here, just for now. And in that space, they are very different than, let's say, our reactive type of consumer around health and wellness. Those might be more our boomers, and they are looking for a solution that's going to address their needs, maybe within a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And then as time increases again, we have a proactive health consumer who are more looking at a solution over the next couple of years. So I'm back to my variable that is time, right? And again, on the x-axis, you can see how time is going to play an important role to address the different aspects of the solution that I'm talking about. And then similarly, on the y-axis, we can also see how different audiences would look at health and wellness in different ways, right? Performance consumer, the younger generation would want to have the quick fix, like within a couple of minutes, couple of hours, I want it to be sorted. Our reactive consumer may be the one that had been diagnosed with a metabolic health, maybe diabetes, and they are engaging actively with their GP, with their consultant, but they're also looking for a solution to help them along their journey within the next couple of months of their life. And then our proactive consumer are the one who may be interested in, let's say, for example, active lifestyle around maybe sport and health, and they are looking for supplemental solution to help them to achieve their objective, right? So if we look at those different pillars, I think it's also going to give you a little bit of an insight on how that solution can be broken down into different aspects. One of them around the ingredients. So maybe, you know, Danny, that's an area that, you know, potentially your ingredients would play an important role here, the type of ingredient that are going to be picked and developed to manufacture a specific recipe. That recipe would have to have some very kind of specific elements that will be included into the product design and the formulation around the culture, around the lifestyle, the life stage, the different habits, the different rituals around the consumption of the product, and then very important as well to address efficacy. So when we speak about health and wellness, when we speak about health tech, you know, consumers have become very savvy. They just want, you know, specific output, and it's up to the brand and to the companies to demonstrate scientifically backed evidence of the benefit of a specific product formulation. Moving on maybe into the offering and the route to market for a specific product, a specific solution. How are you going to address those? Included into that consumer journey, we would need to look at the motivation and how we can best support our target audience. Are we going to maybe work with the dietitians to provide some recommendation? Are we going to develop an app again to help the consumer to navigate their way through their health and wellness? Moving on to the next pillar here around the testing. So not only we are helping our consumer to plan their journey toward their specific objective, but there are plenty of opportunities now to look at the current state and then to have access to questionnaire or potentially testing devices to help them to track the progress, okay? So this is captured here in the testing and the device potentially that can be brought into the equation for the solution to be very relevant to the needs of a specific cohort. And last but not least, around the technology piece, we are seeing an awful lot of progress and effort and focus around the diagnostic of a specific condition, right? So this is a little bit outside my space, but it might be in your space, right? And how we might develop some technology or some solution here that are going to fit into the overall product development and innovation. So it's a difficult enough slide maybe to digest, but again, just take it with a pinch of salt. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor of what this kind of end-to-end personalized nutrition would look like. And here in green, what I was trying to highlight was different kind of signals that I'm seeing at the moment for each of those different aspects, and just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor of how you can play with those to differentiate your offering. So bear with me. I think maybe that's not working now, but you can pick and choose as well to differentiate your product and your solution, right? So you might decide, for example, to have an ingredient here that is focusing on cellular health, relevant to the reactive consumers and the boomers. So you might just pick an ingredient that's in that space. But then from a recipe perspective, that ingredient would be more targeted toward females or maybe males. Just combining those ingredients into a solution that is more aligned with femtech. Here on the offering, we might also envisage a solution or a product that has exceptional sensory properties, to address, for example, people who are into very healthy lifestyle and for their daily performance. So what I'm trying to say is, when we look at some of those early signals, when we look at the different type of segments and cohorts in which we want to engage with, and when we look at the different pillars that are instrumental to offer this kind of end-to-end solution, those are the kind of opportunity that I would like you to consider and see how you address them. Is it something that you are addressing internally? Do you have strategic collaboration with other partners so that you are in a position to work towards a very kind of cohesive solution and value proposition for your target audience? Okay, so a little bit heavy, but that's the best I could come up with to show to you how that fits into the bigger picture around health and wellness for different audiences. Okay, so if we continue to take this specific area as an example, I would like to again give you my little bit of a perspective here on what's happening in the food and beverage space. And this is my pyramid around health and wellness, where again I have broken down our consumers into different type of cohorts. The one at the bottom of this pyramid, they are our mass market consumer. They are looking for nutrition. They are very interested in nutrition, but it has to be affordable nutrition. Even in the very kind of day-to-day consumption of food and beverages, there is already an expectation of addressing nutrition in a way that is going to be benefiting our consumer. So for this, I suppose I would probably refer to all of the low sugar or no sugar drinks that have been launched in the last maybe 5 years, right? And how brands and companies really need to take this very seriously, because even our mass market consumers have very specific expectations from companies to give them products that are going to have a specific nutritional profile with health and benefit in mind. Okay. The next layer on top of the pyramid is the preference-driven consumer. So those are a little bit more specific and a little bit more targeted in their requirements and in their expectation. They are looking for what we call functional foods and beverages. They might be interested in athletic performance or maybe more energy, or maybe addressing some of their concerns around weight management. So they're looking for functional food and beverages. If we are going a little bit higher up here in the pyramid, we are talking about our lifestyle consumer. And those are very much kind of looking for a customized solution, maybe to address their mental health, or another growing category is nutraceuticals, which is the same as, you know, beauty from within. So as we go higher in the pyramid, you can see that, you know, different audiences have different needs and different expectations from the brand. So the last slide and this slide, I think, you know, give you a perspective on how to approach that category from a branding and entrepreneurial perspective, but never forgetting how our consumer-centric innovation would also assess the product and the offering that you want to develop and that you want to launch. Okay, so a similar type of concept, but just to kind of show it to you in a different perspective so that it might be easier to absorb. And actually, at the bottom here, I also have the different life stages, right? Because when we talk about customized or personalized nutrition, that goes from infant formula, which is a category I spent many, many years working on. So infant formula is very unique because babies rely solely on the infant formula. This is their sole source of nutrition. So infant formula has to be developed in such a way that all of the needs, nutritional needs of babies are being met. But this is fine from a consumer perspective. But in terms of customers, it would be mom and dad who will look at the ingredient label in much scrutiny, who would also be very aware on cost. They are also likely to test the product. So all of those would have to be taken into account. So again, I just want to maybe give you an appreciation of how we need to divide this category of customized nutrition. And then as we go through the different stages of our life, we have different needs. And another very interesting growing category is everything to do with pet food and animal food, which has also become extremely fragmented and specialized to address the needs of the different pets. All right. So with this, I would like to move to the next slide, which again is quite heavy, but at least now we have a common kind of pyramid. It's the same as what I showed you earlier, where we can differentiate our different segments here. And on the left-hand side, what I was trying to show to you is how time is kind of important, because sometimes we are addressing the needs of our consumer on the short term. Sometimes it's more medium and long term. And for those specific audiences, sometimes it's a preference or a choice, and sometimes it's a need. So in terms of positioning, in terms of narrative, in terms of value proposition, very important to make sure that there is no friction here, so that the consumer can really identify with the brand, with the product, with the solution, okay? And on the right-hand side here, I'm just kind of looking at it more from a business perspective, giving you a chance to reflect on the operating model and the commercial model that you may have considered as well to build into your business or your project or your product, right? Are we talking about B2B? Are we talking about B2C? What kind of route to market have we considered for the product? And also being able to keep in mind, you know, the market size and the profit margin that are associated with it. Obviously, you know, there would have to be a very strong component around the risk management and risk analysis to address any of the gaps that you may have identified as you are building the strategy, but also going more into the operational side of the business. Okay, so again, just maybe a kind of a summary slide here, just to address some of the aspects that we covered already. So from the top of this slide, we can see our different cohorts. and understand, what kind of segment we want to engage with. Are they the one that really want to look at a solution around their lifestyle, or is it something to do with their preferences? Are we talking about something very targeted around personalized nutrition, or something a lot more geared toward mass audience with affordable nutrition? And then making sure that you take into account how that might impact your cash flow and how you can strategize the model in such a way that you're going to build a sustainable, commercially viable business out of your projects and your business.
Yeah, Raphael,
Okay.
I think we have a
Yes.
question in the chat from Ricardo that says, would you be able to expand more about the risk analysis and assessment tools to use?
Yes. Thank you very much for the question, Ricardo. And I have to say, having spent the last couple of years in the biopharma space, I was absolutely fascinated how they manage risk in a way that is just so lean and agile. So the main tool really is a heat map kind of analysis around the probability and the severity of each of those different risks. They should obviously be segmented in the different discipline and functions with some good mitigation and contingency plans in place, and those should be reviewed on a regular basis. So in a moment, I'll go through the stage gate process to support product development and innovation, and I would really recommend a very strong, thorough risk register to support that stage gate process. So bear with me. There is no quick fix. There is no quick solution. We would need to look at that for your business, and certainly making sure that for each of the discipline, each of the function in your team, that they have a chance to contribute to that risk register and that it is reviewed on a general basis. But the fundamentals are the same around probability and severity. So this is an area that I'm particularly interested in, that I'm working on, because I do a lot of due diligence type of projects, and the risk register is very important for that. So happy to take that offline, Ricardo, if you want to discuss in more details. And I don't know your business yet, so I would need to look at the area that you want to focus on, because there isn't just a one risk register for everybody. It would have to be designed and maintained for each of the different projects and businesses. Thanks for the question, though. I think it's a very important one that, again, could be overlooked, certainly in the food industry. I would have never seen such a big focus, but I was extremely impressed with how the pharma and biopharma industry addressed that extremely well. Anything else on your side, Augustin?
I don't think so. No, Ricardo made a comment that it's a bit of an FMEA approach in response to what you said.
Yeah, no, fair enough. There are different tools out there. FMEA is another one. Again, I'm not too sure where exactly you wanted to go with that, but there are a number of tools that can be used. From experience, FMEA is a little bit more technical and process kind of driven type of risk analysis tool, but yeah, it has to be included as well. I just thought the question was referring more to the overall business, but.
All right, yeah, and I think that's good for the moment.
Okay, excellent. So I hope I didn't lose too many people. We have dropped from 22 to 19, so that's not a good sign for me. I'll try to bring that back up.
Raphael, actually, we have a new question that just popped up. I think maybe before, I think relevant to the piece that you just that we just finished. We had Christina who has a question. Could you give a sense of which of the pyramid categories are up and coming lately? From a consumer perspective, is there a bigger focus on personalized in the last few years? What's your take on the forecast?
That's an excellent question from Christina. Thank you for asking. So my take on that is, I think that the personalized nutrition has failed to demonstrate value from a consumer perspective. In fact, I had a call earlier today about plant-based category, and it's a little bit similar, right? There was a massive push from the industry or from investors to bring plant-based product to the market or to bring a personalized solution to the market. I'm not too sure the consumer was ready, and I'm not too sure that the technology and the science that were due to support the development and the commercialization of those products has satisfied the consumer or the customer, whether it is HCPs or direct consumer and user of those products. So unfortunately, I think personalized nutrition has kind of stagnated a bit because there is still a little bit of work from organization to demonstrate the value and to build the science. So I certainly think that if you have anything in that space that can be, probably more niche initially, but that can develop the trust, the loyalty, the evidence, you're definitely onto something that has a future. For now, I think the space that are definitely growing momentum and succeeding is very much around customized nutrition. I think customized nutrition has deployed itself in multiple different product categories, different solutions, different business operating model. I see more of that kind of happening in the near future, maybe with ingredients, product design, formulation, and overall solution, as I spoke about those earlier. So customized nutrition is also on the up, very much so. And the other one that I think is also growing is affordable nutrition. So the changes might not be as disruptive, but I think it's a missed opportunities if brands and companies do not review their current offering and make some adjustments that are more aligned in terms of general health and wellness. So to answer your question specifically and to be as brief as possible, I think customized nutrition with our lifestyle consumer and mass market consumers with affordable nutrition are the one that I see growing the most extensively at the moment. Personalized nutrition, no doubt, has a future, but it is unclear to me yet how companies are addressing that effectively and whether we are talking about next year, I don't think so, but whether it is in the 5 or 10 years timeline. I think we have lost trust and momentum a bit in personalized nutrition at this stage. So I hope that answers your question, Christina. Otherwise, we can also take that offline and maybe assess that around your offering or your project if you want.
Oh, and we have more questions coming in. Should we carry on, or do you want to?
Well, I mean, the next part is very much on project management, right? So I would be curious to see if there is anything else that's relevant more on what we have discussed so far, Augustin, if you want to send them to me.
Yes, we have one from Mark that says customer nutritions require ongoing testing. Do you see this happening? And then the other one is considerations of a new powder-based ingredient in an existing food matrix. I don't know if you want to answer these afterwards or right now.
Yeah, no, I think this is very good. And so I think maybe on customized nutrition ongoing testing, absolutely. I mean, you know, this slide here goes back and forth, right? You know, you might decide to focus on the testing as opposed to the other area. So depending on the different pillars that you want to work with, it's an ongoing process, and with the data that are being generated along with AI and ML tools, you know, all of this should kind of compound itself quite well and quite fast, right? So you have to kind of feed the model with data and to build that scientific evidence of the benefit, right? So I completely agree with that. There is absolutely no question there. And then you powder, I mean, again, it's a bit like Danny's question earlier. There is an awful lot of fantastic work to be done on the ingredient piece, right? But as much as you focus on the ingredient, because of the B2B space that you're in, don't forget to acknowledge, you know, how there is rarely just one ingredient put into a formula, right? So how is that going to look like from a recipe perspective? And even when you develop your new ingredients, you also have to keep in mind the application, right? And how the ingredient is going to work in synergy with other ingredients, and how maybe the pH or the ionic strength is going to impact your ingredient, you know. So don't underestimate that. As much as you may want to focus in the B2B, ultimately, you will have to consider the end product here. All right. Okay, well, thanks for the questions. You know, I do appreciate the interaction, and I think this is all very relevant for me as well to learn from you about the pain points that you may be having. Okay, so if that's okay, Augustin, we'll continue for another bit.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So let's look at the process around innovation. So we usually have a lovely little neat and clean process there that we would like to look at. And I wish I could tell you that, you know, this is just as easy and simple as this slide, but I'm sure most of you would know that it's not. You know, it might look a little bit more like that. That's kind of what I am familiar with, and what I would kind of recommend as well, what they call this kind of design thinking innovation. And it's obviously costly, but I think by having an adjusted kind of mindset and skill set towards innovation, you're more likely to succeed. I'm currently working on a project whereby we are trying to reinvent and repurpose innovation, and instead of discarding some of those elements here that had been evaluated, we have seen that a lot of companies at some point had made a decision not to proceed with some of those, and they just put them aside. But it might just have been a question of timing or resources or budget. And I think sometimes, you know, some of the idea that companies may have should be revisited at some point. And also around the timeline that are associated with new product development and innovation, we could potentially develop and launch a lot faster and get kind of consumer feedback sooner rather than later in order to optimize the product. So there are a lot of different models at the moment that are probably being assessed by organization, but I think if we want to innovate, we should consider the fail sooner rather than later and engage with the consumer at early stages as possible. And whatever idea you may have had in the past that may have been discarded, don't ever forget to revisit that at some point, because it might just be a question that, you know, the consumer or the technology wasn't mature enough at a specific time, but that it might be in the future. So in my previous slide, I did speak about innovation needed to be strategized in terms of short, medium, and long term. And I think having a model that is satisfying for your project and for your team, and trying to be agile and lean around innovation is very important. And the whole idea of having a number of different prototypes and getting some feedback from the market, and at the same time having the foresight of maybe parking some ideas for the time being, but hopefully revisiting them within 6, 12, or 2 or 3 years afterwards is important, right? So don't forget about the value of innovation and how you might just maximize those ideas at different stages of the growth and development of your company, right? So I just wanted to make sure that you would keep an open mind and be creative in terms of how you're innovating within your organization, and what are the tools that you're using to plan that innovation, but also to kind of execute and make sure that you have a sustainable approach towards innovation, because a lot of companies have a specific product or service that they want to develop and launch, but what is going to be after that launch, right? So we're probably going to improve the product, so there will be some iteration, but we certainly need to have a broad mindset here in terms of looking at it for the long term, maybe 2 to 3 years kind of pipeline. And I do a lot of work around pipeline development, portfolio management, innovation roadmap, just to make sure that we can just put things into perspective. Obviously, we need to streamline and maybe focus on one thing, but we certainly need to envisage the growth of the organization and how innovation is going to be built into the growth of the company, right? So just wanted to give you a little bit of an insight in terms of how I see innovation being integrated into the organization. So yeah, here just wanted to give you a little bit of a breakdown around product development in the food and beverage industry. And we have different phases. So just to make it more, how do you say, so that it can be absorbed in the company and within the team, we basically break it down in different stages. We look at the process, we look at the different stakeholders, and what are the key items that we need to focus on. So an example here, it's quite simple, but it's just going to give you a perspective of how you need to break down the activities into chunks. So we need to source the different ingredients, for example. We need to protect the product, and we need to deliver. So there is a big piece here. One is being product to market, and the other one being route to market. So how do we include those different elements into a project schedule, a project plan, making sure that we have the right resources and the suitable budget as well to look at those different aspects of product development. So I have a couple of slides just to give you an idea of how you can map out the process here, right? That's one of them. Here is a slightly different slide, more looking at it from a project management perspective and how we need to take all of those into account. So on the left-hand side here, you can see I'm using a stage gate process to ensure that we have a multidisciplinary kind of team and input, and that we are all on board on the current state and aligning on where we are going. So going from left to right, we have our different pillars. One of them is looking at product development and innovation from a business perspective, what needs to happen, looking at it from a portfolio standpoint. So I touched on that earlier, and how we are going to strategize innovation within the business, within the team, within the organization. From a project perspective, what would be the key items and key deliverables that we need to think about? And then from a product standpoint, again, looking at some of those important deliverables to develop, test, and launch the product, right? So quite heavy slide. And again, those would have to be taken with a pinch of salt. Some of it might be completely relevant to your product or to your project. Some of it might not be. But those are the type of questions that I would like you to consider if you haven't already. Okay. Again, similar enough slides, maybe looking at it more from a food and beverage type of product perspective. So you can see we have our different stage gates. We have a brief as well, just to agree and align on the detail of the product that we are working on. Ultimately, we don't want to forget that we want a commercially viable business. So we need to ensure that this is all aligned with a clear forecast here. The key activities, I tried to break them down into chunk as well, depending on the different stages of the process. For food and beverage, for example, sensory and testing would have to be extremely important. So I just kind of have a dedicated pillar here for sensory, that just because it is very relevant to the food and beverage industry. It should also be, let's say, you know, Danny, I just want to go back to you because I know that you had asked a specific question earlier, but you know, how does your product impact the nutritional, functional, sensory profile of the product? So obviously as an ingredient, but also in different finished products. Are you going to start with yogurt or meat or bread, you know? This is very important to kind of look at the application for you. Right? And yeah, so again here, you know, in terms of approval and making sure that there is a good kind of governance in place, identifying the key stakeholders who are also going to support us along the way of product development activities. All right. Okay, so again, bear with me, you know, still wanted to give you an appreciation of how all of those need to fit together from a product perspective, from a process perspective, and also from a consumer standpoint, right? So all of those have to be kind of connected at some point for the right decision to be made, and that we don't kind of, you know, end up with a product that is completely misaligned with a consumer, or that a process that is not scalable, that is not validated, that is not repeatable, you know, all of those kind of big roadblock that we want to avoid or miss along the way. Any questions, Augustin? I'm just kind of assuming that everybody is still awake, but yeah. I could be wrong.
No. We have one comment from Danny in the chat.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, we are looking into baking for protein. Successfully swapped 20% of a wheat flour in bread, maintaining performance, improving nutrition and color, but it no longer holds the price point of bread since our protein is not priced at the cost of wheat flour.
Yes, so certainly a question on cost that would have to be evaluated, Danny, because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we go beyond the product here. We need to come up with a solution. So the bakers are not likely to swap if there isn't a real benefit for them, right? Whether it is cost saving, whether it is improvement in functionality or in nutritional profile. So maybe scalability might give you that cost parity. Maybe you need to look at synergies with other ingredients to alleviate the cost increase. Is it possible that we can reduce some of the expensive ingredient by adding yours? So it's what we call cost in use. But those are the very important kind of elements that you need to address, Danny. Yeah. The food industry is usually very much kind of conservative, risk adverse, and unfortunately, product category like bread would be extremely sensitive to pricing as a commodity. Yeah. Okay,
right.
so yes, please.
So Danny says, yeah, we are trying to replace high protein plant-based ingredients like soy or pea that will not work well in breads. And then we have another question from Arun that says, result replication is crucial when introducing a new ingredient. What strategies do you recommend to ensure consistent performance and avoid the pitfall of developing a product that only works occasionally or is difficult to replicate?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, but it might be heavy for our session today. I certainly would love to have more detail from Arun in terms of, what kind of ingredient and what kind of application. I would need to go to that kind of granularity to offer a solution. But yeah, absolutely. I mentioned that, repeatability, testing, generating all of the data and confidence that are required to ensure that we have just not a product, but a real solution here. Because, food and beverage manufacturers are not going to entertain you if you don't come up with a solution. The last thing they need in production is a headache or a challenge. It is bad enough for food manufacturers to ensure quality, safety, and have acceptable yields and output. And so they are not going to bring another complexity unless it's value added for them. So we can look at that, Arun. I'm sorry, I won't be able to answer that if I don't have much detail for now.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Okay, thank you so much. So again, I just want to tell you the benefit of people working hands in hands together, and certainly in the food and beverage industry. What I have seen is, when food scientists work with nutritionists and work with culinary experts and marketing, and when everybody kind of put their head together, it can become absolutely fascinating what we can come up with in terms of creativity. So if possible, bring as many of those together and look at how they could come up with new concepts in terms of product design, and potentially bring some solution that might be not only valuable in the retail space, but also in food service, right? So I mentioned multidisciplinary team earlier, and this is also very relevant in terms of product design and formulation. So don't hesitate to work together. And in fact, Danny, if I may, I think that would be very relevant for your project as well, and maybe for yourself as well, Arun. How by bringing other disciplines and function, this is how you can spark creativity, and you're more likely to come up with a solution. And I have done some work in plant-based with culinary scientists, and I just love the way they think, and also the fact that a lot of them work in the food service space. So in terms of getting consumer feedback, you know, they are better placed than people who are in the lab and who may not have access to that retail shelf. So by working hands in hands with the food service, I think we have fantastic opportunity to look at prototyping and generate customer feedback very quickly and very cheaply, in fact. It's very cost effective. Okay. So here, probably something I mentioned already, but I just want to make sure that we really understand the overall value chain and supply chain here. And as I mentioned earlier, innovation by design can be implemented and evaluated in every aspect of the process. So I'd like you to consider it not only during the development, but also in terms of consumption. So plenty ways to add and create value from a consumer perspective, and how you're going to build that into your activities is something that I would like to leave with you so that you can think about that, but just to understand all of the different steps of manufacturing, distribution, logistic, and consumption. Okay, this slide and the next few are just going to give you a little bit of an idea of how you can map out the competitive landscape for your product and how you can also identify areas for differentiation. So here, for example, I spoke quite a lot about scientific evidence in health and wellness. So I just want to make sure that you can map how your product fits around the science, around the quality, or maybe it can be cost, it can be health benefit. I don't know, you tell me, but this is always a good exercise, quite simple, but the visual aspect of the map is important so that you can identify the competitive landscape and also isolate maybe opportunities to differentiate your offering. Okay, so here we have science and quality. Here we may have service and price. Here we may have a personalized or emotional aspect of the product versus the lifestyle, right? So the question I would ask you is, what are the key attributes, parameters that you want to highlight, or that you want to focus on, or that you want to use at a differentiation point? Okay, so those were just suggestions. I just want to make sure that you have thought about that and that you are focusing in the right area depending on the competitive landscape that you are going to enter. All right. Here is my famous pyramid again. I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of innovation and how you can take some of those into account to create and add value to your business. So at the bottom of the slide here, we have our different kind of life stages, because from a food and beverage perspective around health and wellness, it's just an easy kind of way of breaking down the different audiences. And building from that, we can do some quantitative and qualitative analysis just to identify opportunities for us to innovate or to develop and commercialize different type of products. We can also look at predictive type of research and information and analysis, looking at insights and what's happening in the consumer space. We could also look at foresight and be quite futurist in our approach and what's coming next. And we can also be very kind of disruptive and transformational around innovation. I think it's just important for you to identify, which bucket you want to fall into, and potentially to consider different elements to build resilience or enrich you know, your current thinking around that. So it's a concept that, you know, I just would like you to consider and ask you, how are you integrating all of those different aspects to add and create value to your business, right? And is there anything there that you might be missing that you should consider? Okay, so again, I think, you know, I spoke quite a lot about innovation and how there are so many different ways to innovate. So I hope that somehow you have thought about, you know, a culture around innovation within your team, within your business, within your organization. What are the capabilities that you want to bring into your team in order to foster innovation and to create a different solution? Like, I mean, at the moment, you know, the obvious one is obviously anything to do with AI and ML and how you can bring those kind of functions and discipline and really disrupt and transform the industry. And the last piece here on the right-hand side around processes, around organizational design, how can you innovate and have something like in terms of a team that is innovative, but that's also designed in such a way that you can maximize innovation for the business. So similarly, you know, around innovation and maybe around even open innovation, you can look outside the organization to innovate. And within your organization, you can also, you know, have a good kind of governance process in order to foster innovation, but also to extract value for the business, for the organization. So those are concepts that, you know, you should consider if you haven't already, and how you can again build value and differentiation within your organization or your product to be more successful. So some of those might be relevant, others might not, but I still wanted to throw it out there so that you could consider those different aspects and how you're thinking about those within your team and within your business. Inside the organization, but also outside the organization. So what we have seen, for example, in the food and beverage industry is really looking at the external network and ecosystem and how we can build those kind of strategic collaboration outside the company in order to maybe go faster to the market, or to address some of the gaps, or to manage risk, or to be able to focus on the differentiation points for the product or the service, right? So look within, but also look outside and see what's out there for you to benefit from. Okay, those couple of slides are probably a little bit of the same of what I spoke about earlier, whereby I really think we are at the stage now where we are going well beyond the product per se. It has to be a solution. We need to look at the category, we need to look at the service, we need to look at the technology, and not only for the product that we are working on, but anything adjacent or extreme to that would have to be considered, because I spoke about how there is an overlap and how the boundaries among sectors and categories are starting to be very blurred. And I can really see that continuing for the foreseeable future. So just don't have the tunnel vision. Even when you look at the competitive landscape here, make sure you spread your wings wide, because I think you could be missing something, whether it is a positive risk opportunity or a more kind of negative risk that you may not have envisaged. So again, if I just go back to my food and beverage sector, which is the one that I would be familiar with, there is an overlap here between nutrition, food, and health, which is another evidence of all of those different aspects becoming very entangled. So on one side, it gives us opportunities to innovate. On the other, it can also bring an awful lot of subtle negative risks that can have a significant impact on your business, right? So I'm back to my risk register and the importance of keeping that live and looking at it very carefully and how we are going to mitigate those risks. One more here, I think, is important, and how we can build our teams in such a way that we can work together in synergy, and how different kind of aspects of science can really fertilize innovation. So here we have life science, we have social science, data science, how important it is to take those into account. It goes back to one of my first slides, you know, where we just can't focus on the product or the service. We just need to look at other moving parts here that are going to impact us either today or tomorrow or next year, and make sure that we can have that short, medium, and long-term planning. But we are more likely to have it if we have that multidisciplinary approach from people who look at things from different perspectives. Okay, so maybe I'll just stop here for a moment. I do have a little bit of a case study here around product development, but maybe I'd like to ask the audience if they have any questions on what I have gone through for the last maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Augustin, anything on your side?
I don't see anything on my side right now. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand or put them in the chat now. Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected too many to come our way. This is more food for thought. People may have already considered all of those aspects, and this is great if they have. I just wanted to make sure that I would suggest that they have thought about those aspects of innovation. So that's fine. Let's continue.
Well,
yes?
We have actually, just as you said, we have one question from Ricardo, who says, how do you plug in the innovation model to the regulatory framework?
Very good. Regulatory framework. Well, the regulatory framework is a very important constraint, right? And we have to innovate within that regulatory framework. So it gives more power to creativity and innovation once you have the boundaries clearly highlighted and set. So the regulatory framework is just the boundaries in which we need to innovate. So we can certainly anticipate the next wave of regulatory requirements. So I think, you know, we can be a little bit savvy and strategic about what's coming up next. And I think it's very important to be ahead of the game here and to include that into the risk register. But the regulatory framework is the constraint in which we need to innovate. And in fact, I would really strongly recommend what we call compliance by design. So, you know, someone like me working in R&D, it's all about innovation by design. But I'm sure that my regulatory colleagues would say, yeah, well, you can think that way, but, you know, compliance by design has to be part of the equation. So no matter which way you look at it, you have to comply with the regulations, and you can certainly strategize the regulatory function and making sure that you can anticipate some of those changes. But the constraints are kind of important in innovation because they set the framework in which we can operate in. So again, to come up with something a bit more meaningful, we would need to look at specific area that you have in mind, Ricardo. But this is my high-level answer to your question.
And he has a follow-up question. Would you suggest to develop the innovation by design within the margins of quick regulatory approval?
Well, that's an excellent question. So, I mean, I keep talking about the short, medium, and long-term aspect of innovation. So we need to understand, what can we do right now, and then, what we might be able to do in the future. So, and we also need to focus on the low-hanging fruits, as I call them, so that we can start generating cash flow and have some presence in the market. So it's a question that needs to be asked and that needs to be integrated into the overall business strategy. Absolutely. So it's part of the process and the mindset that the team or the entrepreneur would need to have in order to build a commercially viable, sustainable business, but also ensure that innovation is part of the culture and the business for the long run, right? There is no point innovating today or for the next 6 months and then we're going to stop that. It has to be a very live, dynamic environment in which the company is going to grow.
Mm-hmm. All right, perfect. I think that's good. This is good for now. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. So we'll go through a couple of examples. So this is, one that I have been working on just to put all of that kind of thinking into action and to be able to start planning for the development of a new product, for example, related to health and wellness. So here with the arrow, we can see, the different steps in which we would go through. What kind of concept are we talking about? Sourcing of the ingredients. What are the scientific and regulatory checks that we need to make during the testing of the product? Who is going to scale it up and manufacture the product for us? And how we are going to build this long-term business and make it commercially viable and sustainable in the future. So this is kind of an example of the type of activity that I would have been involved in. The brief, looking at all the different ingredients and what kind of distribution and supply chain logistic needs to be put in place to ensure that we have ingredients that are of acceptable quality, safety, cost, availability, volume, and all of those things. Then obviously a massive part on the scientific and regulatory affair aspects around different health claims that have to be scientifically backed, and looking at the efficacy of those different ingredients or claims that are being made. In terms of manufacturing, there is an exercise to be evaluated around whether we are going to manufacture the product in-house or are we going to look at external partner and build that strategic collaboration with external manufacturing provider and then enter a kind of a negotiation phase with external partners. So this is the type of activity that would need to be looked at, sometimes by one and only person. Sometimes it has to be a team effort, maybe with someone from quality, maybe someone from regulatory, and maybe someone from more on the scientific and technology side, right? But this is an example of the activities I would have been involved in for product development and launch in a specific market, right? So if I just go into that into a little bit more detail, again, you know, you don't want to make it too heavy, but at the same time, it's up to every one of us as entrepreneurs to really be very clear on the concept and what are the key attributes that we need to focus on here to have an acceptable product. So that's just an example of what would have been identified as the most important parameters to design the product. Again, you know, without making it too prescriptive, I just want to make sure that you can have an understanding of the specific that need to be discussed and addressed when we look at sourcing of the ingredients. So maybe, Danny, I'll go back to you, you know, and how someone who wants to develop new ingredients would need to maybe take into account what a manufacturer or what a brand owner would need to may want to see, right? It might be different for your specific type of upcycled ingredient, but just want to give you a flavor of what the different aspects of it might be. Here again, you know, on the scientific and regulatory side, so maybe Ricardo, you know, that is also very important. And I'm not saying that we would wait until that stage to look at the regulatory framework, right? Obviously, the regulatory framework should also be part of the concept, but here it's more on the checking side, all right? So we would need to make sure that whatever concept we have been working on is aligned with the regulatory check. So we are more on the testing here. Here on the concept, it's more along the design, but obviously we would need to test that the product that we have is acceptable in terms of quality, safety, efficacy, and any health claim that may be associated for the dietary supplements. Here again, looking at external partners, it is not easy to find an external partner that we can trust. So I would certainly suggest to spend a good bit of time there to identify, select, qualify the right partner to scale and commercialize the product, okay? So just want to highlight this to you. And yeah, last but not least, obviously, we want to have this long-term relationship with our external partner. So we would need to have those kind of conversation and discussion and enter a good quality agreement and commercial agreement, manufacturing agreement that are satisfying for all parties, because it can be extremely difficult and costly if we haven't done all of those type of activities. So this is just to give you a flavor of how someone like me would be involved in those type of activities, and how you need to think along those lines as well if you intend to develop a new product. In this case, it's just a dietary supplements. You may not need to go through all of those, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what this might entail. Okay, a lot of talking. We're coming to the end of part 2.
I think we have a question from Mark, probably relating to the previous slide or to the section with where do trials fit in on your timeline here?
Well, it's not really a timeline. We would certainly need to look at the timeline after that. So the trial, could happen at different stages. the trials could happen at the concept phase, right? We might want to do a little bit of trial here and get maybe some feedback on from the consumer. When we are sourcing the ingredient, that's also an opportunity to do some trial. In an ideal world, we would also find an external partner that can do some of the trials. So I think that question is very valid, Mark. I probably didn't spend too much time on the trial here because I had that already very much covered in detail earlier. But, you know, it would be very important to do the trial at different aspects, maybe each of those different kind of stages here, right? So the concept, even if we don't have the product per se, we can also do some trials just by running the concept through different consumer audience and see what kind of feedback we are getting. Once we have the ingredient, again, that is going to give us an opportunity to prepare some samples and prototypes and get some feedback. The samples here would also be used for the testing. And it is important to take into account that the process that is used at the external partners, or even if we develop our own process, certainly the product that comes out of those processes would have to be evaluated and tested. So yeah, at all of those different aspects, Mark, very much like, you know, everything we spoke about here, you know, certainly, you know, it is important that the product is tested at those different stages. Anything else? Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yes, perfect. All right, we have another question from Arun. Arun says, you mentioned the importance of food safety and quality. What recommendations do you have for developing a new process, and what general points should we consider to ensure we don't overlook any critical checkpoints?
Excellent. So safety and quality are obviously a prerequisite for anybody who is looking at the food industry. In terms of important aspects, so I don't know how mature the process is, Arun, on your side. There are a lot of good help available for the different food processing steps that are already very well established in the food industry. So from a validation perspective, you know, it's quite easy to validate a food process by working with equipment suppliers for each of the machinery that is going to be used on their own, but also when they are combined together to design the full process. So a lot of good information already out there to qualify and validate the process. If you are developing a new technology or a new process, then I would again recommend that you would work hand in hand with the equipment supplier and go through you know, FAT and, you know, factory acceptance testing and SAT, along with IQ or QPQ, and then 3 independent but consecutive batches to confirm that you have a robust process. So a lot of those kind of mindset and skill set is very well established and implemented in the pharma industry. I think the food industry may do things slightly differently using HACCP. But if you were to develop and scale a new technology or a new process, I would strongly recommend that you would follow the pharma guideline in terms of having 3 independent batches validated. So, you know, there would have to be a lot of work on the protocol, on the implementation, looking at the by pressure testing the process, and then making sure that all of the variable and parameter and all of the critical control plan points are in place, and that you have a robust process. So I'm not too sure exactly whether you're referring on something that's already very well established, and if that's the case, I would just leverage the knowledge and the expertise of the equipment supplier, but making sure that it is customized for your product, so you can be an active part of that discussion. But if it's a new emerging technology that you're trying to develop and scale up, then I think there is an awful lot of great learning from the pharma industry in that space. Anything else, Augustin?
So I think Arun had a follow-up. He said, agreed, I've worked in Nestle getting to know about these things at a very huge scale, but these might not fit at an early stage of a startup.
So yeah, you're right. But you can still consider a lighter version of those concepts at the early stages. I mean, you still need to develop a robust process. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have the specific of what the challenges are here, but I think, you know, potentially strategic collaboration and partnership with equipment supplier in terms of how you can do that. I'm not an engineer, I have to say, but I work a lot with engineers, and I think the way they think and the way they look at those things is very very interesting. So I don't have enough information, Arun. I can't give you a very detailed answer, but if you want, we can take that offline and discuss it further. So maybe, you know, my response was geared more towards something that's a little bit more advanced. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have the quick fix here for you. But I think maybe bringing either the right discipline, the right function into your team to help you to develop that process and ensure that you have a robust process of working with equipment suppliers, strategic partners to help you to fill the gap. There is obviously a part here that is difficult for you to address. And you know, I think there are people out there who may be able to help, and I don't think it will be me, I'm afraid.
All right, thank you for that. I'm looking, and I don't think I see any more questions right now.
Okay, so I have no notion of time at this stage, but I just wanted to share a couple of key takeaways and how innovation in product development can be looked at in so many different ways. Here are some suggestions about how we can build a life cycle management of innovation. As I said earlier, it's very important to be creative and innovate, but just not as a once-off. We need to look at continuous improvement. We need to look at emerging technology. We need to look at the competitive landscape so that we can build a commercially viable and sustainable business, right? So those are a couple of ideas of how new products can be developed and commercialized in the food and beverage space, right? Just something to consider. And then similarly here, I think I mentioned that it was very important to have a balanced portfolio of projects around innovation. Some of it might be very disruptive. Some of it might be a lot more subtle and incremental. And then once we have a strong core product, we can also decline and deploy some of those products and have what we call line extension project of maybe different SKUs, right? So I just want to make sure that you are not losing sight of other opportunities to innovate in order to have this kind of short, medium, and long-term approach towards product development and innovation. So I think here as well, I'm just going to give you some suggestion to start thinking about how we can generate IP or revenue, and how you may have already looked at those opportunities and build those into your operating model, right? So knowledge, idea generation, product development, process development, R&D support, direct industrialization. Is there any opportunity here for you to identify value stream, build IP, and hopefully develop and commercialize the business or the project or the product that you're currently working on? Okay, I think this is pretty much the core bulk of the slide that I had prepared. I have many more, but I just didn't want to come across as being overwhelming with information. So I hope I gave you a good understanding and overview of product development, especially in the food and beverage space with a focus on health and wellness, but also help you to look at innovation from a more global and strategic perspective.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for this, I think, very insightful session. I think we have one question from Agustin here. Thank you very much for the presentation. Which are the trends that you see for the upcoming years in terms of longevity space? What do you see?
Longevity?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, this question. Oh, now I see. Yeah, I can share my screen. Longevity space. I think what I refer to, let me share my screen again just to make sure that people know where this is going. 1 second. I was wondering. Yeah, so I think this is it. So it is related to this point. So I think what we're talking about here is specifically related to the aging population who is looking for a solution to expand lifespan and quality of life. So we are talking about two different aspects: people who want to live longer and people who have to have a better quality of life as they age. So in this space, I kind of mentioned earlier that it's an area that I certainly can't really pretend to know or understand very well. But I think a lot of those omics therapy are definitely going to mature in such a way that it's going to address the interest that consumers have in living longer. And you know, we are definitely kind of moving away from the space that I would be very familiar with. This is kind of very much around health tech and looking at technology that are still very much under development at the moment. I think, you know, with AI and ML tools becoming available, we are likely to see massive growth of this over the next. I still think it's, you know, maybe 10 to 20 years down the road, though. At the moment, I have to say, I haven't seen anything really with some strong kind of scientific input and something that the consumers have developed a lot of trust in, right? And it's very much the space of personalized nutrition, which I think is very appealing. It's definitely an inspiring kind of progress and innovation, but I still think that it will take some time for this to be commercially viable and accessible for all of us. So no doubt that there is a future in it, but I still think that it's very embryonic right now and nothing has been clearly demonstrated in terms of scientific evidence.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, Agustin, looks like it answered your questions. I don't know if you have any more questions from anybody, many of the startups. I think we've covered quite a few grounds on today's session. Yeah, and I think anybody else has any more questions? I'm going to do a little auction here, going once, going twice, and no. So, all right. Thank you very much, everybody in the audience. Thank you so much, Raphael, for coming. Thank you very much for coming back to us this year and for all your information. And yes, the recording is going to be shared with the startups. That was a question that I decided to answer directly. And I will actually